Hello, 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 amigas, and welcome to Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast. I am excited today to bring this beautiful soul on the mic, and her name is Marissa Alma Nick. And she just wrote a beautiful, beautiful book. It's called Rebel in Venus. I'm going to put it here because I'm also on YouTube. So here it is. Go and buy this book. And she's a choreographer. She's out in Florida, Miami specifically. And I really wanted to get her on the podcast because she wrote a book that is very daring, especially for Latinas. Very daring because these are topics that we don't talk about, that we try to push away because of shame, because of showing your vulnerability, because of judgment, because of trauma. And this episode, we're gonna go really deep in it without disclosing so much about the book itself, because I think you need to buy this book to be able to really understand. And she really talks very vulnerably. What is that a word? Very vulnerable about these topics that we dare not speak of as Latinas. And so we get to have this beautiful conversation. So thank you so much, Marissa, for coming here and being with us here on Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for having this podcast. I'm excited to get into it.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. So before we dive into the book, I really wanted to have a conversation about your upbringing, because I always feel that the upbringing leads into who we are today. So tell us here on Amiga Handle Your Shit, where are you from, your family background, all those amazing things.
Yeah. So I'm a Miami girl through and through. I grew up here. My father's Cuban. He moved from Cuba to Miami. He immigrated, ran actually from Cuba to Miami in like 59. And then my mom is a white woman from Florida. And actually they met in Atlanta. So, things are meant to be, right?
Right.
But I grew up in the beach, in Miami Beach. And I think like how you said it influences where we are, just that in itself. Growing up in Miami, for me in the 90s and early 2000s, like one of my first icon heroes was like Daisy Fuentes on MTV.
Yes, that's right.
She's like, yeah, like the Miami Cuban girl and like Daisy Dukes and Miami culture. And you even see it in the movies in the Birdcage, like. Growing up here, I remember seeing everybody rollerblading in bikinis, whether you were a man or a woman. This like beautiful blend also from the Caribbean, this like hypersexual expression. Growing up in that, and also for me, not in a household that didn't actually, and I'm so like grateful for this, didn't teach shame. I had friends who changed into their short shorts on the school bus. But I was able to walk out the door, and not feel ashamed. At the same time, like, it's so interesting growing up in Miami because you become, I think, also a woman very fast because it is the city. It's the beach, especially where I grew up on the beach. And I think that does like make a big presence in the book. I also feel like Miami is another character in the book itself. So yeah, that's where and I'm back in Miami now. I actually lived in LA for a little bit.
Oh.
Yeah, so dance took me around, and I ended up back in Miami about 10 years ago. So I've been back here since. Yeah.
So you talked about dance, and so I want to get into that as well. So tell me, how did that start for you?
Yes, when I was 3, my mom put me in dance class, and I liked it a lot. It was a very like simple thing for me. I kind of explore, like, without jumping around, and I really like the idea of controlling knowing what it meant to have control over my body at a young age, which like was juxtaposing other things happening, you know, and the discipline of it, just the expression of it. So it's something I honestly have always done. I went to all the performing arts high schools. I got my BFA in dance. And then I moved to LA to do commercial freelance dancing with an agent. I wanted to do like what all the older girls in the studio did, that like, you know, I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. And so I did that. And choreography was always calling to me though. Like even back in high school, I would remember getting like a lot more excitement over the choreography concerts versus like the other, you know, the teacher concerts. I was like, I want to make it. So I started, I did this movie Rock of Ages, and yeah, the location for filming was in Florida, not in LA. And I forget why, but it was. And I hadn't been back to Miami in about 10 years. And it had changed a lot. A lot of my friends from this high school I went to, this performing arts high school, this like some painter friends and musician friends, film friends, people were moving back here. And it felt really, Miami felt different. And so I decided to stay to start exploring choreography more than freelance dance in that sense. Started the company. So I started my own company. It's like an all-femme dance, performance, contemporary dance company, Alma Dance Theater. And I started that in 2015. And have been doing that ever since, just like so immersed in the world of dance. I've directed ScreenDance festivals, taught dance, you know, dance. So, yeah. And I don't want to jump to your question. I feel like, and now I'm writing. How? Why?
I know. Exactly. We're going to go into that because I'm like, okay, so how does dancing lead to writing a book?
Trauma.
So, oh yeah. I read the book, amigas, and yes, there's a lot of trauma.
But you know, I feel like I said this to my friend the other day, and I mean this. I was like, I needed the universe to break both my knees to sit me down and write. Now, I have always been a writer. I always kept a journal. I would write short stories, poems. Up until high school, I really got into entering like writing contests. And this like super bad bully, I always think I stopped writing. I think I stopped sharing it for a long time because these girls in high school, they kind of like ganged up on me. And one day I had this journal and it was like a big deal. And I came off the elevators of like where my high school was, and they had taken my journal and taken out the pages and put it all like on the walls of like the main hallway. Isn't that terrible?
Wow.
That's
horrible.
And it was terrible.
But to me, it's so outlandish to put your vulnerability in front of everybody without your permission.
Yeah, that was I think like, yeah, that definitely impacted me, and I never shared writing for a very long time, for till now. And so in 2019, 2020, December 2019, while performing, my right meniscus tore. Just from going from standing to like just standing up, it just snapped. And I mean, I've been dancing since I'm 3, very intensely, like an athlete. I like gave myself no days off, 7 days, training, performing. And that's it. So it was like sort of like wear and tear over time. And one day it just went. And that put me in crutches for 5 months, that surgery. I had never been humbled like that physically, you know. 2 weeks later, while I was in these, like right after the surgery though, so that was December 2019, then on January 1st, 2020, my best friend, she killed herself. And then 2 months after that, COVID came. And on top of me not being able to understand how I could dance and choreograph, like the world shut down, right? So like everybody's industry shut down. There was nothing happening. And I don't do well sitting still mentally or physically. Things got really dark, like to like sum it up, things got really dark. A friend really helped me get into therapy. And while in therapy, like intense trauma therapy, EMDR specifically, for a year and a half. And while I was doing that, I started to write. And I did find this sense of fearlessness, because like all my worst nightmares were coming true, one after the other. So I remember like I just kind of carelessly shared it with somebody who suggested I might sit with an editor and consider this to actually share it with somebody else. And, I pretty much said, fuck it. And like, let's see what happens. And here we are, and funny enough, like even like through this process of writing, it was like, again, sometimes I'm like, what is the world trying to say to me? Because I was like, well, I'm still going to do some dancing. Like I made a show again. I went back to what I normally do. And then my left knee went same way while performing, just standing up. It just popped, and I was like, oh, it felt just like the right one. But it was so weird because I was still holding back on putting the book out. It was done. It was like right on the edge of being out, and it was very scary, and I think I was also like keeping myself busy. Like I gotta wait, I gotta show, I gotta wait, I gotta show. And I don't know, I just like, I found myself back in the same place 3 years later. And that was when I like pulled the trigger on like, let's put it out then. And kind of like leaning into it being more about myself and for like, what could this be for other people? Yeah.
Well, let's dive into this because it is beautifully written. And I want to say that, at the beginning of this book, it perplexed me, because I'm like, why do we have a warning? Right? And the warning, amigas, is Rebel in Venus contains scenes, details, and situations that trigger PTSD and emotional trauma. Scenes of sex, drugs, abuse, rape, and suicide may cause discomfort to some readers. Please consider your own sensitivity beforehand. And, when I read this, I do have to tell you that I was like, whoa, because then that put me on check based on my own traumas. And so as I was reading this book, I was like, I couldn't help but to really be honest about the things that have happened. And some people say to us, but I say for us, on these encounters of abuse. And so, I really want us to start discussing about these triggers. I want to talk about the abuse, the challenges of navigating your life, having been a victim of violence, a victim of sexual abuse, a victim of all these things, of domestic violence. I talk about these things all the time, but to put it in a book in a way that can help us understand ourselves, it requires a certain level of skill. And you are a dancer, and this is your first book, and I'm like, wow, to write this book is to know and live these things. So I want to be able to talk about certain situations in the book where I found that they are true, because I'm like, this cannot be just off the top of somebody's head. This actually might have happened. So I want to find out from you, is and one of the characters, Layla, who's the protagonist in this book, is she you?
Yeah. Yeah. 2, 3, 4,000%, yes. Yes. And like a version of and there's variations, of course, creative liberties and such, but yeah. And it's interesting because I was like, do I put this out as a memoir? Do I put this out as a novel? And for a lot of, it was more about creative freedom. And I think just as a born and active artist for so long now, that's always important to me. And I didn't, I don't have this background in writing. So I also felt very free to do it however I wanted to do it. I had like nobody in my head telling me what was right or wrong. And I did. I wanted some. I think it's okay to say this too. I'm like telling myself it's okay.
Yes,
I
yes.
wanted to also protect myself in my own ways, because I'm still at a point where there are like there's certain things in my life that I'm still working through myself. Like there's things that do go deeper, and I imagine it would inform me for future projects. But yes, I mean, yes, it is. Layla is absolutely a mirror of me, 100%. And Maria, her best friend, is a carbon copy of almost exactly like somebody very much as well.
Yes.
In my
Wow.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that these two characters, Layla and Maria, I think we as Latinas can really, really find likeness in it, right? And amigas, you will need to read this book because it is fascinating and so revealing. And in the book you talk about shame, and at a very young age. And so one of the things that I always feel and believe in is like, how can we stop the sexual abuse of minors? And in your book, you really describe in detail certain situations of abuse of minors. And I want to hear from you. What have you discovered in writing this part about you and how you get to help other kids out there?
Yeah, I love that. I think what I'm grateful for is that we're in a place now where we are having these conversations, which when I was growing up, when you were growing up, there wasn't a language for it, and things sometimes, right, do happen to kids. We're not always watching the children 24/7, and things happen to us when we're kids. And if they're that confusing enough, you probably don't even say anything. And it was, for me to be fully transparent too, the way I finally, 38 years, shared what happened with me as a child was by like asking my parents to read this book. That was the only way I knew how to like do it. And I think that the way, it happens more often than I think we want to admit that it happens. And that's the thing. And it usually does happen close to home. And there's like these benign experiences, which the book really starts off with one, and I'm just going to say, like just being flashed, just like little girl walking down the street and a man doing this thing, and like nobody's there to explain it to you. And you're like, I don't understand what just happened. It's a lot.
Oh yeah, no, believe me. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then the more extreme ones that I go into, and it's realizing how much shame I lived with, and my relationship to sex as well, and my own body, my self-worth, just so many things, right? And the funny thing is not even funny, it's like interesting that when I started to, like, I was like my closest friends in my family, I was like, here, read this, and while I was writing the book, and a couple of my very closest friends, it was like, that happened to this, like it happened to them too. And it was funny because we're like finally seeing each other differently, and we're like there's so many similar characteristics and even adult responses that we all like kind of carry in the same way now. And so it's like, to me, it's where the conversation can happen. And so with kids who don't have the language, who don't have access to these words and this sense of communication, and as children we want to please, right, the the thing that's taking care of us or the ones we look up to. It's just like a natural thing that happens. So I feel like how we have to keep creating and exploring ways to communicate with our children and deepen our relationship with them and learn them. Because also, right, I feel like it's, and I don't have kids, but I feel like it's not like a book, here's how they're all going to respond. You know, how are you really getting to know your child? What are the tells? And that they, you know, because if we're scared to talk about it, they're going to feel that. And so they're not going to talk about it either.
Right.
You know?
Yes, exactly. I mean, you know, as you were talking about the first, just that it just seems kind of like, what the heck is going on when that person exposed, right? And that made me recall of an event that happened as a little girl. And I was like, shit, she's kind of talking about something that happened to her that also happened to me. You know, I remember also, you know, I'm just playing with my little friend, and this man in a van shows something that looked like a penis. And I could never shake that off. Only she and I will remember that, and we did not say anything to anybody because we had no idea what the heck is going on. And so it's so important for us to write these books, like your book, to really, you know, elaborate on how it's something so just like in a kind of like a flash could have an impact on your life.
100%. And that's the thing, like the book, you know, how you said like the podcast, you want us to feel like we're having like a girls' night, like a conversation. And that's, I think, like the other like thing that's so poignant through the book, you know, it's Maria and Layla smoking a joint, talking about these things. And it's like literally to say like your personal Me Too moment. But it is so validating in like a way that's healthy, because there's like healthy validation when something that you've held on to, this memory that's again so confusing, it's branded on your brain, you know. And I mean, you grow up and it's like, it just makes me giggle because I'm like, of course we have a culture of dick pics being slid into DMs here and there because, you know, that's just what happens, you know, like you just get a dick in your face, you know, and just call it a day. And it's when you think about, you know, it's like the mindset behind that is almost like it's wild. But to me, if you go deep, it's almost like, well, I think what did I do to deserve this? Right. And again, that's a benign experience, but like, is it because I was standing here? Is it because I was wearing this? Is it because what did I do? You know, it must have been something I did.
Yes. Oh my God, girl. Whew. This is so telling, because immediately as a little kid, you're not thinking you're defenseless, because that's not part of your vernacular. You just don't know what's going on. And so you start blaming yourself for what adults are doing to you. And then when you want to tell somebody, you just believe that you're not believable.
100%. Completely. It's like it's such a weird defense mechanism, you know, and like you understand it. That's where like it was like, as a dancer, this is so funny because I'm like, oh my God, I've been like in my body, but not until I'm doing this like trauma therapy, EMDR, that really has you saying, I feel this in my body. This is what I feel. I've been so good at disassociating, even as a professional, highly trained dancer, could master physical disassociation. Yeah, like so easily. And so at the same time, that moment when you're a kid, it's like every time you smell the smell, you see something that jars a memory, right? It's like you're constantly on this like hyper vigilance. Your nervous system is triggered, you know, so it's like you're reliving these things over and over again. And it's hard to unravel at the same time. It's like, it is so liberating to also realize again, like, I didn't do anything and my body's just been trying to protect me. Like, that's what all this anxiety is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. Your body's trying to protect you. And then you realize, oh my God, this shit is, what the fuck? Like when you become an adult, then you understand, like, what the fuck happened? Like, this is like undoubtedly the most heinous thing for a kid. Truly. And you live with that cross, right? Until you break it. And I feel, as you were saying that you're Layla, that you are breaking that cross through this.
Yeah. And continuing too. For me, I don't know, and I only speak for myself, but I definitely was not willing to deal with any of this until I had to. It was a lot. I don't know. I had to lose everything. I think I don't know. I don't know what it was about me, but I had to lose everything, and then almost lose myself to myself, and sort of make a decision. And I mean, because it is heavy, especially when you don't know what it is that you're feeling all the time. Like, why do I feel like this? And and I think a lot of girls feel like that even without basic trauma, like, I don't know, basic traumas, even without these intense, traumatic experiences. Just walking around as a girl can be very exhausting, very exhausting. So for me, it became, I had to make a choice to figure out how to get this literal like weight off my shoulders, because I was starting to feel like my friend. Like, if this is what living feels like I can't pretend anymore. It hurts too much all the time, and everything somehow is always my fault, and I feel like a burden, and like, what am I doing here?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I completely understand what you're saying. And as you're growing up, you finally, okay, so now you're an adult. And then in your book, I want to come back to this, you have a chapter called Lessons from the Club. And you talk about three things. You talk about confidence, self-love, and boundaries. And I really want Amiga to get this book, because there's so much detail within those lessons. But I really want to talk about boundaries, because this also has to play into the fact that you did not have a boundary as a kid, because how do you even fucking know what a boundary is?
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
So that's another thing that keeps on copying, it replicates throughout your entire life. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the boundaries when you were working at this club.
Yeah. The girls talk, I mean, everybody talks, at the club. It's just like you talk, and there's little room for dishonesty. I mean, you're already naked, changing tampons in front of each other, like you're talking very candidly. And it was mind-blowing to me how I would witness and hear these other women owning themselves in this, very bizarre, working at a strip club is so bizarre. Navigating it is spectacularly interesting, but it requires somebody to have those three things, which is confidence, self-worth, and boundaries, or you will be taken for a ride. What was so interesting is it will mirror you, who you are in the club or out of the club, and I think that that's true for all women as well, whether you're a sex worker or not. But it was very extreme for me, because I didn't work in a club where, so I'm in Miami, right? Like, when I was doing this, and Miami is known for having little boundaries in the strip club. But there are a few that are really strict on no sex, no nothing. Even when you give a lap dance in the back, you have to keep your underwear on. There's cameras, the whole thing. Security guards. So I picked that club specifically feeling safe, but customers will have a hard time often, humanizing you. And it's interesting because they're often people who try to cross those lines, and it's really like you're giving a lap dance and their hands on your hips, let's say on your butt, and like 2 seconds later, their fingers are trying to like in every which way slip like through, your panties. And I mean, I remember at first I would try like navigate it, but sometimes they would just get like so aggressive. And my physical response, not just at the club, but like in personal time, is to freeze and like submit. And not in like some cute, fun, sexy, kinky way. Like it's, again, that's just like just full detachment. Like I'm just do whatever you want. I'm here. And oh my God, the performing part of me is like a double-edged sword, because I was like, and I can perform for you, like whatever you want. It was, such a weird experience and very outer body. And I would see, you'd be sometimes giving a dance next to somebody else, and you would see them slap hands away, respond in very different ways. And it wasn't about the money, because money comes and goes. It wasn't like I'm going to do it to take the money. It was, I literally just couldn't stop somebody. And it was wild to me because I remember like one day I realized how unsafe I was. And it wasn't the first time, because again, like the disassociation was so strong. But one day, like something like clicked, and I was like, even though I had worked at this club for a few years, I was like in a strange place with a strange person. Nobody was there to protect me. It shook me, and nobody put me there in that situation but myself. Like I could have pushed the button too. I could have done the signal to the camera. Like I could have done all the things. And I scared myself, and that's when I stopped working there. And because I couldn't protect myself at all. Yeah.
Whew, that's deep. I scared myself. And I mean, I think that really can resonate with many amigas out there, because, if you're scared, how the heck are you going to protect anybody, much less yourself?
Yeah. And I think the trauma with children, and I guess like, cause I don't know, I'm not a licensed therapist, so I don't know what the studies are, but I have noticed there's something about that childhood response, right? The fight or flight thing. And I mean, you're this small and the person is this large. So you just sort of learn to like shut down, and you embody that over and over again. It becomes stronger and stronger. It is like, it feels like becoming a puppet, it's like somebody literally is like holding my throat, and I'm like, I can't move if I want to, I can't run. It's like those dreams where your legs are stuck.
Right.
And it's because you're, from what I've understood in therapy, it's like this defense mechanism that was trying to keep you alive. The best thing that you could do at that moment, back when you were a child, was to like literally play dead.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Just let it pass, whatever, and just stay still.
And I was so jealous of my friends, like the girls I worked with, because I was like, my God, they're so strong and like boss bitches. Like I want to be like that, and I felt like an imposter, because I carried myself that way. But when it came to it, I was just shut down.
Wow. Yes. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of amigas out there that had to shut that part of their lives down in order to survive. I have some amigas and experts in my team, and she taught in my course, the Amiga Way, where about the concept of ACEs, which is a study that has shown that the amount of traumas that you experience will continue to perpetuate as an adult. And it's really fascinating stuff. And as you're talking about this stuff, it really makes me like, how often do we have these experiences in our life? Which I can honestly say, very often. Very often. And we don't get to uncover and unravel them until we actually stop. As you said, you stopped, you froze, you're done with the dancing at the club, and now you're taking care of yourself. Look, going through EMDR, doing all the therapy, and it's so important in order for us to really heal that part, that trauma, because we need support. Literally, we need support. So what's your advice for amigas out there who are going through these traumas, through these horrible events in their life? You know, how can amiga handle her shit when these things are happening? What's your advice?
It's, you know, it's so hard to get past that shame, right? And so don't shame yourself for shaming yourself, number one, right? Like, and that sounds like a conundrum, but it's okay. You know, it's normal. Everybody does it. And so I really believe in good friends. I think the number one thing we can do, especially in this country where we don't have access to certain luxuries like mental health care, if you have access to a licensed therapist, get in there, and one that specializes in trauma. You know, somebody once told me when I was in a better state to go shopping for a therapist like you're shopping for shoes, you know, try it on, because you got to find your fit. But trauma is really is specific, and it's layered. For me, and there's different trauma treatments. For me, EMDR ended up being the one that really worked, and I did it for a year and a half, which is a pretty long time to do that treatment. But I did have complex PTSD. I had, again, like this narrative of trauma through my whole life. And the thing is that's so normal. That's heartbreaking to say, but what I just said and what I've been through is actually not very uncommon. But the shame keeps us from talking about it. And that's why I go back to the good friend. And that shifted everything for me. I didn't do it soon enough with the friend that I lost, but that really, that losing somebody that way and not saying the thing I wanted to say in the end, all that guilt, you know, I don't know. I like the vulnerability. I just was so vulnerable after that. I was scared. And having a friend that you can really say these things to that don't make sense, right? That feel very scary. And it's not easy. And that's what it's like. I also was letting go of a lot of friends at this time, because oftentimes when you're in that state, you kind of, what it's like, trauma bonding, right? Is not, I learned this in therapy. It's not like, oh, we experienced the same trauma together and now we can share that. That's like actually like a healthy bond. It's more that you go through something traumatic and your nervous system you haven't healed it. So your nervous system keeps seeking out this experience, this bond through a person or through an experience. So you're trauma bonding to people that keep you in this state of trauma that you're so used to. And it's actually your body trying to tell you to, like, please heal me. And that's when you really finally go into that like healing this, you do start to shift overall. Like literally standing into your power is wild, and it takes so much time to unlearn things and relearn. So it's like, if you don't have a friend or two that you can be vulnerable with and don't know how to feel safe with each other, I think it's really important to learn to let maybe those go and find those friendships that really do, like, you're filling each other's cup, and you shouldn't feel shame about these things. And truly, like, girls, like, I hate this statistic, but I don't think there's a girl in the room who hasn't been through something of it.
Which is very,
you know,
sad.
It is
really sad.
It is. But I feel like that we have to be each other's first ally. We have to be the ones that talk about it first, at least, so we can develop this language that our world doesn't have. You know, just society constantly is telling girls and women to act still, you know, a certain way and talk a certain way, it's not, we haven't really, it's not that changed. So it's, I think the big thing, like that number one, is friendship. So somebody to like understand what you're going through, and you don't have to have the same experiences. We can sit at the same table,
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think personally, I am 49 years old, and I feel like it's a lot better today than it was when I was a young girl, because we didn't have any access to anything. There was no internet, nothing. But for me, I always feel that in order for this to change, we have to focus on men and boys and raise boys to be honorable and respectful.
Yeah.
Not only about
Yeah.
themselves, but towards women.
Yeah. The conversation that we have with male figures and boys is like, that's where, like, allyship, right, and understanding of each other. I did, like, the coolest experience so far. I'm gonna keep talking. I have to grab my charger or my computer's gonna die. I did like, when I had the book release, I did this live reading, and there was a man there who seemed to be maybe in his 50s or something. And I did the reading. I read at that particular event, Lessons from the Club. That's the chapter I read. Yes. And I didn't, like, he comes up to me and he was like, I just want to say thank you. And I just bought your book on Amazon for my daughter. And I was like, whoa, like, I wasn't ready for that. That really caught me off guard. I was not prepared for a father to listen to me read about working in a strip club and talk about this book in particular, and like choose to buy it for his daughter. That's huge. A girl wrote me also that she read some of the she read a chapter out loud to her husband, that she had been trying to like tell him something for years. She just like had a hard time. So like, and then had him read the rest of the book. And I was like, I think that it's not that, oh, my book is the answer, but it's the conversations, right, that come from that book, or just from, sometimes it's like, if you have a guy friend, or you have a brother, or you have, what men do you have in your life, and are you talking to them about this? And if you aren't, why aren't you?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because it's not fair to not engage with each other, because we're not in each other's heads. We're living two different experiences. My best friend is a straight Black man, and I'm a mixed Latin queer woman. So we have two different lived experiences, and we've been best friends for 20 years by communication. Like, you have to talk about it, even the things that are uncomfortable. And it, because then otherwise, yes, we're going to do generations more, decades from now, girls are still going to be living in rape culture, and that's not fair.
It's not fair. So for the moms out there that have boys, let's really teach them to honor from the get-go, and not to shame them. Right? I mean, because honestly, I feel like none of that shit would happen but for the fact that we have these men that are, either pedophiles that are living amongst us, or are just freaking creepos out there who are living amongst us.
Yeah. Because again, like, our mass media culture still isn't teaching men to behave a certain way, yet. So yeah, I mean, it's like, it also feels so nuanced and complicated at the same time, but it's not easy, and nothing is. And because it's, we should not do it, because it's not easy,
When it's not easy, that's when you should be doing it.
Exactly. Yes. I keep saying, like, oh, I just had this dream where there's like, some teenage girl is in her like tiny shorts and rollerblading and her headphones, and like she lives in a world that she's like so relaxed and knows that she's safe. And if something were to happen to her, she knows like the world will believe her.
Yes.
And just that belief in itself is also a very heavy thing to walk around with. So many of us don't report these things because we know, we're not assuming wrong, but we know that the system is not on our side. It's the most terrifying thing to talk to a male police officer after you've been assaulted. You know, it's very difficult. And there's still not a language around that for how to handle, you know, rape victims differently. It's, you know, so we have, right, we can't like really say, it's easy to blame the system. We could blame the country, we can blame everybody, you know? So like, what are we doing at home with our friends, with those people we see at work, you know, that we encounter? You know, what are we really talking about, and like what changes are we really making for like not just little girls, but yeah, no, especially little girls, because historically it is a fucked up world to live in as a little girl. It's exhausting. At a very young age, you know, you are very aware that it is different for you than the boy.
Yeah. Let's live in a world when there's no differences. That's what I love to uncover in my lifetime.
Yes.
In my lifetime and in your lifetime, obviously. Oh my goodness, my beautiful soul, man, you're amazing. Marissa, is there anything else you'd love to share on this podcast? But before we finish here?
I think just the friends thing, you know, I wrote this book thinking of my friend and myself. Like I kept saying, I wanted people like me to see themselves as a hero, not a burden. And that's a, like, you know, because there is a trigger warning, but if you get to the end, you know, you'll feel like you found like a friend, you know. And it's important that there are protagonists, like heroes like us out there, you know, not trying to be anything other than what they are. And so I think like I just want to like say that.
Yeah, I mean, we're many if not all of us are deeply flawed, and it's beautiful to be flawed.
It is. It is. Yeah.
And instead of shaming,
thank you so much.
Let's embrace it. Well,
yeah.
I'm so grateful. Thank you so much, Marissa, for being here. And we'll definitely put your book on our show notes so that people can come and grab that link and participate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here on Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye, amigas.
Bye.